A growing humanitarian crisis at the southern border.
Migrants seeking a new beginning over the Mexican border.
We are seeing an increase in the number of migrants arriving at our southern border. Our immigration system is absolutely broken.
Hello, my favorite English language learners. It is your favorite English teacher here, Amy Joy. And currently, a big topic in the news and in politics is the crisis at our border. So in this video, I'm going to teach you 22 advanced English vocabulary words to discuss the topic of immigration in the United States. So let's jump right in. Word number 1 is immigrant. And this refers to a person who moves to another country to live there permanently. For example, the United States has a long history of welcoming immigrants who contribute to the nation's growth and development. And word number 2 is migrant. This word is very similar to immigrant, but it refers specifically to a person who moves to find work or better living conditions. And since the word migrant has this meaning of moving from one place to another in search of opportunities, it usually refers to people who come from poorer countries and move to richer countries. For example, a large group of migrants came to the US from El Salvador to give their families more opportunities.
She says, "My goal is to be able to get to the United States and enter legally with my family, to have the opportunity to work, for my children to study, learn languages and new things."
And word number 3, border. This is the imaginary line that separates two countries. And a very common collocation with this word is to cross the border. For example, every year, thousands of people attempt to cross the border into the US in search of better opportunities. And word number 4 is the word smuggler, which comes from the verb to smuggle. And to smuggle something or someone into a country means to secretly bring them in illegally. So a smuggler is a person who illegally helps migrants cross the border. For example, the authorities arrested a smuggler trying to bring a family of migrants into the country. And word number 5 is the word coyote. When you see this word, you might think of the animal, but it is actually slang for a person who tries to smuggle in migrants, especially from Latin American countries, into the United States for a fee. For example, the desperate migrants paid a coyote to guide them through the dangerous desert on their journey to cross the border. And word number 6, Border Patrol. This is a government agency that is responsible for keeping illegal immigrants out of the United States. For example, Border Patrol agents asked for everyone's passports in the car to prevent any illegal crossings. And word number 7 is to detain, and the noun or adjective form is detention. And to detain someone means to hold a person back or to keep someone under government custody. And in a sentence we can say, if someone comes to the border illegally, Border Patrol agents might detain them in a detention center. So these people are held or kept under government custody in the detention center. And before we move on to our next word, I want to remind you, if you are studying for the TOEFL, the IELTS, or just want to improve your English vocabulary, go to my website, yourfavoriteenglishteacher.com, where you can find my new vocabulary workbook. In this workbook, I review 75 advanced C1, C2 level words that I use as a native English speaker and that I think will be really helpful for you. I also cover collocations and specific grammar that goes with the words, so you not only understand these words, but you can also use them correctly. So after this video, go visit my website, yourfavoriteenglishteacher.com, and buy my book today. Okay, let's move on to our next word. Now, there are a lot of different reasons that people come to the United States, and one is word number 8. They might be seeking asylum. And you will hear this word a lot in the debate on immigration. And asylum means protection or safety given to someone who has left a country for persecution due to their race, religion, nationality, or political opinion. Now, traditionally, asylum was meant to give people a safe place to come who didn't have freedom of speech or religion like we have here in the US. But now many migrants come here seeking asylum because of violence and poverty in their countries. And there's a big debate about whether or not that should qualify as asylum, because it's not really related to their beliefs or their race, but simply due to the harsh economic conditions in their society. So you will hear different people with different opinions about what asylum means and what should actually qualify as asylum. Now, number 9 is the verb to flee. And the simple past of flee is fled. For example, many migrants flee their countries because of violence and poverty. And number 10 is the word refugee. Refugee refers to a person who flees their home country due to persecution, violence, or disaster, seeking safety in another country. For example, thousands of Ukrainians fled their homes and became refugees in the neighboring countries as a result of the Russian invasion. And number 11, migrant workers. These are people who move to another country for work opportunities, and often in labor-intensive jobs like agriculture. So in a sentence we can say, many industries such as construction and agriculture rely on migrant workers to perform jobs that citizens won't do. Now let's move on to talk about policy and documentation. Word number 12 is visa. And this is a government document giving you permission to enter and stay in a foreign country for a specific purpose and time period. You might have a work visa, a travel visa, or a student visa. There are many different kinds. For example, after studying in the US for 6 months, May had to go back to China because her visa expired. And word number 13 is green card. This is officially known as a permanent resident card, and it gives immigrants the right to live and work in the United States. For example, to apply for certain jobs in the US, you may be required to show proof that you can work legally, such as a green card. And speaking of visas and green cards, we have word number 14, papers. This is a slang term for the documents required to be in a country legally, such as a visa or green card. For example, undocumented immigrants live in fear of being asked for their papers and being deported or sent back to their home country. Which then leads us to words 15, 16, and 17, undocumented immigrants, illegal immigrants, and illegal aliens. Now, all 3 of these words refer to an immigrant without legal papers. But the interesting thing about these words is you can often tell how someone feels about immigration or what political party they come from, depending on which term they use. And this is because the connotation or the feeling behind these words can be more positive or negative. So let me explain. Word number 15, undocumented immigrants, is the most politically correct or kind or least offensive term for people staying here who do not have their papers. It simply defines someone as being in the US without the proper documentation or papers. Typically, Democrats or liberals will use this term because it is the least offensive and most neutral. And Democrats tend to have greater empathy and more tolerance for people who come here without papers. Then we have word number 16, which is illegal immigrants. And some people find this term a little bit offensive because the word illegal really paints these immigrants as criminals or bad people, when in reality, many of the immigrants coming here are so desperate and under very difficult circumstances. And so some liberals, some Democrats tend to avoid the term illegal immigrant because even though it might not be legal that they're here, they don't want to describe these people as criminals or evil. But you still might hear this word more commonly than word number 17, which is illegal alien. Now, if you think about the word alien, it means someone who is not from this world. And by using the term alien instead of immigrant or person, it tends to dehumanize or think of immigrants as less than human. This term has been widely discussed and written about, and there was a big movement among Democrats and liberals to stop using this term and explain why it's so offensive. So you will rarely hear a Democrat or liberal using this type of language. However, if you listen to more conservative or Republican media, this term gets used quite often, and considering how widely this term has been debated and discussed, It is very clear that their use of this term is rather intentional.
So one day the Empire State will be the illegal alien state at this rate.
So it's really interesting to see how our word choices can really reflect our own values and thoughts about this complex topic. Now, moving on to word 18 is the acronym DACA. DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And in this title, you see the word childhood arrivals. And DACA is a program begun by President Obama that protects undocumented immigrants who arrived in the US as children. So for example, maybe there's a family from Mexico who came and brought their young children to the United States. Those children grew up in American public schools, they probably speak English, and they feel like America is their home. But since their parents came without papers, their children also are undocumented. But at the same time, this is the only country they might know. And they could potentially be deported back to their home country even though they're not familiar with it anymore. And this is a very complex issue that DACA tries to address. For example, DACA recipients can work and live legally in the US without fear of deportation. And speaking of DACA, we have word number 19, which is dreamers. This is an informal term for the children that came here with their parents and are protected under the DACA program. For example, dreamers face uncertainty about their future because their legal status remains a subject of debate in Congress. So I believe at one point DACA expired and it needed to be renewed, but that process needs to go through Congress. And so these dreamers, or these children who were brought here at such a young age, are constantly in fear that their legal status will be taken away or changed. And so it remains a topic of discussion and debate in our government. And moving on to word number 20, we have to deport or deportation. Now, I've already used this word a few times so far, but this simply means to send someone back to their country. And we often see this used in the passive voice, to be or to get deported. For example, many undocumented immigrants live in fear of being deported. Or another example, after his visa expired, he was detained by immigration authorities and deported to his home country. He was sent back. And who is responsible for deporting people? Well, we have an agency called ICE. ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And ICE is a U.S. government agency responsible for enforcing immigration laws. For example, this week, ICE agents arrested and deported a group of migrant workers who were here illegally. And lastly, word number 22 is sanctuary states or sanctuary cities.
But I'll tell you, we were the ones who said we wanted to be a sanctuary city, sanctuary state. Massachusetts, Illinois, California.
Think about a sanctuary as a place where you are safe. If there is a sanctuary city or a sanctuary state, that refers to a city or state that does not fully enforce immigration laws in certain situations. For example, they might not arrest undocumented immigrants who are working here illegally. Even though the federal or the national law says that they should be deported, these states and cities just kind of ignore what's going on and they don't actively pursue people living here illegally. These cities and states aim to create a safe environment for all residents, regardless of their immigration status. And for example, California and New York have declared themselves sanctuary states to protect undocumented immigrants. For example, they don't actively send ICE agents looking for undocumented immigrants. Okay, well there you have it, 22 advanced words to talk about immigration in the United States. If you found these words helpful, definitely go check out my website, yourfavoriteenglishteacher.com, where you can continue building your vocabulary with my new vocabulary workbook. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned something new. If you did, make sure you like it and subscribe to my channel so you can keep improving your English with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.